Amazon taking FBA. FBA used to be a loss to them. They would make up their money in ads and in referral fees. Now FBA, for the first time ever, has broken even. They're not going to be satisfied with that. They are going to make it a revenue source. And I think that they're going to we've already seen they're doing it aggressively.
Welcome to the Ecomm Breakthrough Podcast. Are you ready to unlock the full potential and growth in your business? You've already crossed 7 figures in sales, but the challenge is knowing how to take your business to the next level. Join Josh Hadley, an 8-figure Ecomm business owner and investor, as he interviews highly successful business owners. Get ready, because you're going to learn specific actions you can take today to help your business reach its full potential and leave a lasting impact on the world.
Welcome to the Ecomm Breakthrough Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Hadley, where I interview the top business leaders in e-commerce. Past guests include Kevin King, Michael E. Gerber, author of The E-Myth, and Matt Clark from ASM. Today, I am speaking with Chelsea Cohen, the CEO of SoStock.com, an Amazon inventory management software. And we're going to be talking about all the hidden costs and fees that Amazon is charging you, how to identify them, and how to reduce them so that you are more profitable. This episode is brought to you by Ecomm Breakthrough, where I specialize in investing in and scaling 7-figure e-commerce companies to 8 figures and beyond. If you're an ambitious e-commerce entrepreneur looking for a partner who can help take your brand to the next level, my team and I bring on that hands-on experience, strategic insights, and the resources needed to help fuel your growth. If you or someone you know is ready to scale or looking for an investment partner, reach out to me directly at josh@ecommbreakthrough.com. That's Ecomm with 2 M's, and let's turn your dreams into reality. But today I am super excited to introduce you all to Chelsea Cohen. Chelsea is an Amazon inventory and FBA fees expert and the co-founder and CEO of SoStock.com, an Amazon inventory management software that is now part of the Carbon 6 ecosystem. She has helped hundreds of 7- and 8-figure sellers increase profitability through stockout avoidance and fee prevention. Chelsea has also been featured on the $1 Billion Seller Summit, 7-Figure Seller Summit, and Prosper Show, among others. With that introduction, welcome to the show, Chelsea.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Chelsea, super excited to have you on the show. I myself was one of the first people that signed up for SoStocked when you first came out with it, because I knew the pains that we were experiencing personally with our inventory management. I think back in the day, so we used Forecastly. That's not even around anymore.
Yeah.
But that was our first inventory management software. Yeah. And then I brought on an operations manager at one point. He had a lot of CPG experience. And we went in with another, I can't even remember what it's called now, but it was a much bigger, it was it was a Sage product. It was one of their inventory management platforms. But anyways, it was $20,000 a year. And I was and it couldn't even do everything we wanted it to. And I was like, why are we paying all of this money? And so lo and behold, SoStock comes around and here we are. So Chelsea, with that being said, I think people have heard about SoStocked and how powerful it is, but I'm curious, in the world we're living in right now, in the economic environment, we've seen Amazon just continuing to raise fees for everybody. We see shipping becoming more expensive. They're adjusting their structure, it seems like, on Amazon so that they're profitable, but they don't necessarily care about your profit. So I'm curious to hear from your perspective, Chelsea, what's on the top of your mind? What should 7- and 8-figure Amazon sellers be focused on right now to make sure that margin squeeze that Amazon's putting on everybody doesn't really just completely tear apart your bottom line?
Yeah. For sellers, I think the big focus needs to be on understanding unit economics. So understanding what goes into the profitability of your product. There's the idea of landed costs, and landed cost is a variable. It's if you're looking at your landed cost based on data from last year, the shipping costs have changed significantly. They're all over the map right now. There's a lot of problems in shipping, in the shipping industry. So getting an understanding of what your landed cost is, but then breaking that down further to storage and all of these fees that can stack up, a full picture of your business, not just from when it hits Amazon shelves or, or after their regular fees, but looking at the long-term effects of that inventory and how that affects your profit margin, I think is huge.
Yeah, I think that is super important. It can easily be overlooked. I remember for our business, I could make a bunch of mistakes with inventory and, we sent in too much inventory into FBA back in 2016, 2017, and it might sit there for a year or two. And I might get charged some nominal, long-term storage fees. Well, now that game is completely flipped on its head, and Amazon is severely punishing you, to say the least, if that stock sits in their warehouse for anything longer than 180 days. So I'm curious from your perspective, Chelsea, what are some of the hidden costs and maybe fees, not necessarily that Amazon specifically charges, but all throughout the supply chain that you see a lot of e-commerce sellers overlooking?
Yeah. So first and foremost, shipping costs. We kind of touched on it a second ago. Understanding, having a broader view of what's happening with shipping, I think is important to understanding why the costs are fluctuating, and also to prepare for the cost changes, as well as the changes in terms of the lead times. Because when you have a longer lead time, obviously the dynamics of your cash flow are going to change. So that needs to be adjusted. If it's possible, consider going to your supplier and saying, hey, the lead times are longer. Can we, make some adjustments to the payment terms? But just continuing business as usual and not paying attention to the fact that, for instance, the Red Sea is a direct path from China to Europe, and that has had, piracy. There's a lot of unrest happening in that region. And so ships are going around the bottom of Africa, and it's adding so much time. So the supply and demand is being thrown off because these ships are taking so much longer to deliver products. And then the Panama Canal has had huge droughts. So the Panama Canal, the width of the Panama Canal is shrinking, less ability to pass through. So all of these things add to the global freight shortage. And then on top of that, you add what recently was announced in domestic shipping, which is that rates are going to be coming up in Q3 because there's more demand. In that last year, there was a huge overstock and people were not they were not sending in more inventory. So now that the economy is starting to pick up again, there's a lot more, the freight industry is coming out of a recession, and they're going to start charging a lot more money, and there's going to be less demand. So being prepared for all of those things, I think it's important to have that view, that perspective. And we actually have a newsletter that goes out weekly, which is how I, have all of this insight, is that following these things, you can be making strategic decisions and strategic negotiations and planning if you know these things in terms of the whole global e-commerce or global commerce, as opposed to just being focused on Amazon.
Okay, so I love that. So, all right, Chelsea, I'll ask you the hard question. All right, so what's the solution to these problems, right? As you talked about, if we understand these issues, we can start making strategic decisions now. So what would be your recommendations?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, the possibility of adjusting payment terms with your supplier. There's a couple of different ways. The first question is to understand the supplier's business. And because you don't want to go to them with basically like, hey, you need to make some concessions or else. Understanding that they have cash flow and they have things to pay for as well. So being able to go to them and say, hey, maybe you have to pay up front or pay extra for inventory for raw materials up front, and then they can be a little bit more lenient or flexible with the payment terms on the other side, but figuring out a way that can be a win-win situation so that when you have these longer lead times, you can afford them, you can balance your cash flow. I think that is kind of one of the first things to look at, is understanding what the lead times are and the impact on your cash flow, and then figuring out how you can balance that with your supplier.
Yeah, I think that is so important, Chelsea. We talk about, I've had previous guests that talk about like negotiating payment terms with your supplier for a better, improved, cash conversion cycle. And typically we'll talk about that in terms of, hey, you're not going to be able to launch as many new products, right, if your cash is locked up. As I see this, it's like, if we continue to experience more issues with shipping and everybody starts shipping more, and, Q4 is upon us, and, we know everything takes a lot longer. The longer it takes you to return that capital means A, it's not sitting in your bank account. B, it means you aren't launching more products, but also like you're less nimble and able to, I guess, navigate around challenges that are certainly going to come up in your business. And so I think like negotiating with your supplier on those upfront payment terms are so essential. Chelsea, I'm curious, like, what payment terms have you seen some brands get?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've seen some crazy payment terms. I saw, a friend of mine, they did, what was it? It was like 0% down, 100% like net 90. That was like years ago, but that was the craziest I saw. I don't think that's a win-win scenario, but one of those that tends to be helpful is paying a percentage up front and then paying on whatever ships out. So let's say, for example, we pay 30% up front, and then we produce, let's say, 3 months of inventory. They might store those 3 months of inventory, and you would only pay the other 70% on whatever ships out, say 30, 60 days after it ships. So being able to have the stability of your inventory being produced and ready to go, and then storing it for, low cost or no cost at that warehouse, and shipping it out in such a way that your cash flow is not strained.
Yeah, I like that. So almost using them as like a warehouse, right? That's like, hey, we'll manufacture X amount of units, but let's only drip in half or whatever, a third of it now, and then bill me for this, but you're not going to bill me for the full amount till later. I really like that strategy.
Yeah.
Love that. Okay, Chelsea, lots of fun. Okay, what are some other maybe fees that people need to be paying attention to? So we talked about shipping. What else?
So storage is obviously, you've got anything that you do with inventory is going to cost you. That's the majority of our costs, right? Fulfillment, transport, storage. Inventory touches everything that has to do with your money, really. So storage is a big one. I think what we're starting to see really is a lot of people moving into AWD, Amazon Warehousing and Distribution. And I haven't talked to many 3PL owners, but I am interested to find out what the industry is like, because it's been, swinging in the direction of people moving from 3PLs to Amazon Warehousing and Distribution. And there are other FBA storage fees that can be benefited from, kind of having that strategy as well.
I'm curious. So what is your recommendation in terms of AWD? So I believe that you're saying a lot of, like, Amazon rolled out their new inventory placement fee this year, right? But they said, but if your product's in AWD, then you don't have to worry about paying this inventory placement fee. I'm curious, like, are you recommending people go to AWD? Give me the scenarios where AWD makes sense. Give me the scenarios where AWD does not make sense.
Sure. So AWD, if you're using a 3PL, one of the, there's always a danger in moving from one 3PL to another. And Amazon, AWD is basically a 3PL. There's less of that personal touch You can't just pick up the phone and talk to the warehouse manager about a problem. You're still dealing with Amazon. So having that in mind, and it's always a good idea to have a backup. Like I would never, just as I never said put all your inventory into Amazon, always have a 3PL backup. I feel the same way. Have a backup to your backup. Don't trust Amazon with all your inventory. It's still Amazon. That being said, if you're stuck with inventory, there's a couple of different scenarios. So the costs are pretty low. You can get around the inbound placement fee. The rates are steady throughout the year, so you don't have any peak storage. And then the rates are 48 cents per cubic foot year round versus, the 78 cents per cubic foot, $2.40 in Q4. So there's significant savings there. And then if you're using supply chain by Amazon, meaning you're using Amazon Partner Carrier or you're using Amazon Global Logistics, they have an additional rate that's a reduction. It's called integrated. So that if you qualify for this by using their other services, instead of 48 cents per cubic foot, you're paying 36 cents per cubic foot. And then the rest of the fees also, the transportation fee goes from $1 per cubic foot to like 86 cents per cubic foot, something like that. So all of the fees are also reduced by using supply chain. There's incentivizing you like crazy with, the carrot and the stick. They're incentivizing you to go into using the entire supply chain by Amazon system, really.
So is that a good approach then? Because Amazon, so I'm really curious to hear from your perspective, like why is Amazon so adamant about trying to get people into AWD? And then again, like AGL, right? They have discounted rates. Like as we've shopped quotes, like AGL continues to come out on top with the lowest rate.
Yeah.
Right. But I see this as being like Amazon being Amazon, where it's like, yeah, we'll give you a really low price to begin with. Then we know once you're in bed with us, you can't leave. So like, then we just jack up your rates and we'll screw you a couple years from now. It's all right that we're losing money right now. So I want to hear your thoughts on that.
I think that the numbers do look very attractive right now. It's important to do rate shopping as well, because we can just say, oh, well, this is the best rate. And it may not be. And to do it, not just once, but over time, because the market has to change. If you've got 3PLs that are higher priced and Amazon's starting to take their business, they're going to start lowering their prices to be more competitive. So I think that, on the one side, it could be that they're trying to lock us in and then, we get stuck. But on the other side, pay attention to what's happening outside of Amazon in terms of the rates, and if those start coming down because of Amazon and what they're doing. So I think that, that's the never, like I said, never trusting Amazon fully, but also it could be a good thing for the rest of the market. Makes
sense. So here's a hypothetical for you, Chelsea. So let's say I'm getting a good rate through AGL into AWD, but I have some wholesale orders that I have to take care of. Now, AWD, yes, you can ship from AWD to different locations, but you can't put they're not going to do packing slips and different things like that for you. So you're going to have to utilize a 3PL. What would be your thoughts on the strategy of like, okay, I still need a 3PL, but it doesn't need a ton of stock.
Yeah.
Needs a little bit. Would you recommend saying like, all right, let's take the AGL rate, ship everything into AWD because it's still going to be more cost effective. Then ship the product, maybe it's a pallet. You take one pallet of the 10 and you ship it to a 3PL that then can do your wholesale or retail, or maybe it's your Walmart, other sales channel orders for you. What are your thoughts on that? Do you like that? Does that seem like overly no, it's probably better just to split the shipment to begin with?
It always depends on the numbers. I would say that sounds like a great plan, because you've got everything in that one container, but you have to kind of run the numbers on, well, would an air shipment to, the 3PL make more sense and then just to think through the projections back again. Everything can be projected. You want to project out how much am I going to need over, let's say, 6 months versus, if I ship directly versus if I pull out from AWD. So it really just depends. I think it's a good strategy, but always, I always like to say, run the numbers.
Yeah. Okay. Makes a lot of sense. All right, Chelsea, let's go into, you talked about that, modeling and projecting out, your fees and also doing some inventory forecasting. Mm-hmm. So tell me why that's important. And also, I'm curious to hear, how do you actually go about doing this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So projecting, really in terms of stock, I always kind of like to say it's an inventory forecasting system more so than an inventory management system. And I think that's an important differentiator that hasn't really been made in our industry enough. And when it comes to forecasting, if I can forecast, obviously we've been forecasting inventory orders, that's tied to forecasting sales. You can't forecast, inventory without sales. But then if you take it a step beyond, you can forecast fees, you can forecast profit, you can forecast cash flow. And so those are the things that we're focused on first and foremost. The fees, that's where the bleeding is. So being able to look at not just what is happening today is you've got all these profit tools and they show you what yesterday's profit was and what months and last week's, and they're showing you the profit as it is today with the money that has hit your account right now and the money Amazon has charged you right now. But they're not looking at what is Amazon going to charge you next month and the month after that and the month after that. Yeah. I open up, accounts, look at some client accounts, and they're sitting on hundreds of thousands of dollars in forecasted storage fees. Oh. So being able to forecast for those is huge. You've got, I looked at yesterday, I was looking with a client and they had tens of thousands of units in aged inventory that was in the 240-day range. 270, basically, you go from $1.50 per cubic foot in aged inventory fees, and then 30 days later they're going to be paying $5.45 per cubic foot. That gap into 9 months is just a huge gap, and it can mean tens of thousands of dollars in just not reacting in time to those things.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So Chelsea, I'm curious, do you have more case studies that you can share with us of, here are some mistakes that other people have made. We don't need to share brand names, but here's what I see when I look into people's stocked accounts. I see people making mistakes here. I see people winning here. Can you share some case studies?
Yeah. So we have a 9-figure seller come in to work with us, and his big focus was on fees, being able to have visibility into the age of the inventory right now. But a big focus was you always want to start with the latest, the oldest inventory. And he came in and he had, he has tens of thousands of SKUs. He had hundreds of SKUs that were over a year old. So he's incurring aged inventory fees at such a high rate. We're talking projected out for a year. If he did nothing, if he didn't change his business at all, he'd have been paying a couple $100,000 in overstock storage fees. So we went through and we isolated first and foremost the oldest inventory, looking at everything over a year. And we said, here's all the items over a year. You can go through and being able to isolate those. That's first and foremost. And if you're not using a software, Amazon does have a report that can help you with this, which is the FBA inventory report. I got teased by someone for saying it was my favorite Amazon report, but it is. It's kind of hidden, so you have to go into the fulfillment reports, go to inventory, and then you have to click the more button. So I don't think a lot of people know that it's there, but it has your inventory age for every single ASIN. So you can find your, what we did is we pulled up all of his products that were aged over a year and focused on those and went through and said, okay, this one you can price drop, this one you can this one, turn on marketing, this one remove and sell on a different channel, and just going through that whole list and starting with the oldest and then working your way back with, if you don't have aged inventory that's aged that dramatically, the focus would be on anything over 240 days, because 240 days, you're about to hit that, that time bomb is about to go off. And then anything over that is already incurring those crazy fees. So that would be the strategy, I think, for anyone. And with him, it was, I think, within 3 months, we were able to save him about $38,000 in fees.
Yeah, that's unreal. And I remember, so this year we've been working closely with Chelsea and the So Stock team as well to get better visibility on our own inventory situation. So we have a lot of different seasons within our business, right? We have products that are highly seasonal that will do well during, graduation season. There's stuff that does really well during like the back to school season. There's stuff that does really well during the holiday season. And then at the beginning of the year during like the New Year season. Okay. Now the challenge with that is like when you 10x your sales in 1 month, but then sales fall off a cliff, that inventory projection and forecasting becomes so important on Amazon. Because like I said, back in the day, I could let it sit there and be like, over purchase this year. That's all right. We'll sell again next year. But as you mentioned, like, I can't afford to keep that inventory, leave it in that full year. So my team and I, we went through and we did a whole analysis to say, all right, here's how much it costs to remove the product. I relish in the days when it was 30 cents to remove a unit, right?
I remember 20 cents.
It was, yes.
Yeah.
So that is long gone. So these are big conversations that you have to have, because removing inventory is still going to cost you at least $1 a unit at a minimum. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then you have to be able to calculate, all right, if I remove 10,000 units, it's going to cost me $10,000. Now that sounds painful, right? But what happens if you're incurring long-term or storage fees, right? The higher rate beginning in, let's say you're going to hit it at 180 days, right? It's going to be at a lower rate. Let's say you're getting $1,000 a month in overage fees or long-term storage fees. But then once that 240 days kicks in, and let's say you're still outside like another 90 days or 120 days from your next peak season, at that point, you may be being charged $5,000, $7,000 a month, at which point take the one-time hit early on, remove the inventory, and then, put it back to a 3PL, then ship it in later. Is that kind of the strategy that you're recommending with people?
Yeah, running the numbers. I think that some people have, they can do that if they're, like with your case, removal fees are fairly low. Some people are sitting on removal fees that are like $3, $4, $5 a unit, so it depends. It depends on the situation, but sometimes, especially with products that, are highly seasonal, that could be a good strategy. That's where the AWD strategy also comes in.
Yeah.
With a seasonal business, since you don't have to worry as much about ranking, my understanding, not having a seasonal business, my understanding is it's better to sometimes to run out of stock in your season than to sit on a bunch of stock. Is that kind of the strategy generally?
That is not the strategy we employed last year, but it is the strategy we're employing this year.
Yeah, I have another seasonal client and talked to him about that. And my recommendation was, if you've got this heavy season, stock up AWD and have kind of the 3PL. You can, send a bunch of inventory in, but don't send everything in that you're going to sell. Send some of it to AWD. Have a little bit of a backup in 3PL, where if AWD is not doing its job quickly enough, you can send in. But then kind of like musical chairs at the end, you don't want to be sitting in the FBA chair when the music stops. You want your inventory to be sitting at AWD, because the storage situation is a lot better, especially once you get into Q4, if you don't have a Q4 product.
Yeah, 100%. So I think AWD makes a lot of sense. And if AWD makes the mistake and ships in excess inventory, supposedly, now again, I'd have to wait and see the numbers because we're just barely testing this out. But supposedly, they're not going to charge you the long-term storage fees if you have it on auto replenish on AWD. The challenge is with AWD, they're not forecasting your inventory and saying like, oh, next month you're going to sell 10,000 units, even though last month you only sold 1,000 units. So you have to manually force that shipment in from AWD. And then again, any manually forced inventory orders, like you're on the hook for. So I don't know, maybe you could seed it on AWD. You're like, okay, surely I'm going to sell at least 5,000 units. So seed that, and then AWD will keep dripping stuff in along the way. I don't know. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah. On the, the upswing and the downswing, definitely kind of paying attention. You can't go on autopilot during that period with Amazon because we don't know what data they are using. We'd hope they are using some sort of seasonality data, but their algorithms on restocking have not been proven to be the best. So I think that watching and monitoring that side of things and taking that more under your control is important. I mean, because even if Amazon waives the low inventory level fee or the overstock fee, you're still getting charged those standard fees, which are pretty costly.
Yep, agreed. All right, Chelsea, give me another case study.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I like to talk about is, with everything in terms of storage and fulfillment, size really matters. So we've done a lot in terms of resizing. We have resizers for products and then also resizing cartons. And so that's something that we built that about a year and a half ago and have seen really great results. But the story that I like to share is not my own story. It was with, I think Travis Ziegler. He's co-founder or founder of Profitable Pineapple. He also had an eye care brand with his wife, Jenna, and they sold that business. But before they sold it, one of the great stories that I like to tell of his is with regards to resizing their products. They had these sunglasses, and the sunglasses came with a hard case, and they didn't promote the hard case. They didn't, showcase it in images. It wasn't something that was really a big selling point. So they decided, well, why are we doing this? Why do we have this hard case? And they put them in soft cases, and that changed the entire dynamic of that product. They were able to significantly reduce their fulfillment fees, also reduce their storage fees. They could get more units per carton, more units per pallet. So their shipping fees and their handling fees went down. And then when I asked him how much does he think that he saved annually from that decision, he said $70,000 was probably what they ended up regaining in profit.
Yeah, that's massive savings. So you're saying not only resizing helps in terms of the FBA fees, which I think are probably the most significant, right? Because if you can either decrease the weight of your product by removing maybe excess packaging, I think a really good example of this is like, let's say you're in the small standard size right now, but your product weighs 16.2 ounces, right? Which now forces it's over a pound. So now you're automatically in large standard size.
Yep.
Okay. If you could remove 2 ounces of packaging, right, and sit at 15.9 ounces for the packaging, you now drop down into small standard size, which I think some of those you're saving almost like 75, 80 cents per unit, right? And you look at that could be a huge savings if you're selling, I don't know, 50,000 units a year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, tens of thousands. I mean, we do, we have a free tool, sostock.com/tools, but we also have done bulk audits. So we can run an entire catalog. And sometimes it's just that Amazon has pushed you into a higher size, higher tier. We've seen times where, we run it and it says, if you adjust your weight by 0.01, you'll get into the next lower tier. Well, that's that's a remeasurement. That's not, completely changing the dimensions of your product. It's submitting and saying, Amazon, you need to remeasure this. And so keeping your eyes on that, paying attention to that, I think is huge. Because that's just kind of, it's not a glitch, but it's technically it's kind of a glitch in your business. So that would be the first approach where you could start gaining more money, putting more money back in your pocket before you even turn to your supplier to restructure.
Do you feel like that's kind of like news to a lot of sellers when you talk to them about remeasurements?
Sometimes, yeah. I think that if it weren't news, we wouldn't be seeing as many as we have. We see it a lot. So
Yeah.
I think that I don't believe that enough sellers have a standard system for identifying these things, and also for requesting remeasures. If you're not requesting remeasures monthly, then you probably need to address your system, because when Amazon, because especially if you have a large catalog, thousands of SKUs, there's probably a good chance that you should be doing regular remeasurements across your catalog. So, and actually, Seller Investigators has a free tool. So whether you use Seller Investigators or not, they have it's called the weights and dims tool, where you can just plug in your data on, this is what my weights and dimensions are. And then they will alert you if Amazon has changed something. They'll alert you and say, hey, this has been bumped into a higher size tier.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think so, again, this is another thing that we worked on with you guys as well this year, because we were noticing that, some of our products, we'd sell similar products, but one would have a higher FBA fee on it for no given reason. And so being able to do that remeasurement makes all the difference. Now, sometimes we actually found out this, Chelsea. So the problem is we weren't getting we ourselves weren't measuring the product when we would get the final product from the manufacturer, right? So now we have a team member that literally we get the samples in, we measure it, we measure the thickness, we measure the weight, we measure everything, and we say, this is exactly where this product should be. We code that into our spreadsheet and obviously into software tools. And then that way we know without a doubt what the FBA fee should be. We've seen it go both ways. When Amazon's made a mistake and we're actually sitting in a lower fee that we shouldn't be. Now, that doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. But most of the time, Amazon's overcharging you for some reason. I don't know, something else was sitting on the scale, or I don't know why. And I'm curious, maybe do you know?
Drop on the scale at that very second, right?
Yeah, do you know how Amazon measures their stuff and why there's so much variance with that?
It's called a Cubiscan. In terms of the variance, generally, because I was on a panel with Jungle Scout, and I think it's the CTO of Jungle Scout used to work in that area and worked with the Cubiscan. And I thought I was going to get some secrets, but it's just, the scanning and what we've all known is generally the product might be squashed. The one that they grabbed might have been kind of funky. So that's kind of, that's the thing that you have to pay attention to, is if you've got a product that's so close to the line, oftentimes that can happen more likely than something where you give a little bit of wiggle room for something to swell. Maybe it's humid in the area, maybe something got squashed. And make sure I talked to someone yesterday, they had a problem with they loaded a very heavy box onto something that was very light, and their product got squashed and everything got pushed into a higher category because the items were warped. So paying attention to making sure that your boxes are structured in such a way that things are not getting crushed.
Yeah, and I think the other one, I think this happens a lot with anybody that polybag stuff, right?
Yep.
Anything that is loose, right? Amazon, it doesn't matter that bag could actually be squished down a little bit more. That the Amazon employee is not doing that. They're not let's shrink this down, then put it in the scanner. They just take it from the box, they throw it on that thing, it gets Cubiscan, anything excess, if you've got air in there and that pushes you over in terms of thickness or size or whatever it may be, it's not going to affect weight, but it will affect your dimensions. And if that happens, because now Amazon's doing like that cubic dimensions, right? The dimensional weight too. So my goodness, Chelsea, there's just so many ways. I guess this would be my question to you, Chelsea. Like, how in the world does an Amazon seller like have a handle on all of these little things that truly can add up? We talked about dimensional weight. We talked about, being able to optimize your cartons when you're shipping them in. We talked about not sending in too much inventory, too little inventory. How do you manage this?
First and foremost, I think that you need to have data. I think that that's been the biggest problem, is that this is not an exciting, it's exciting for me. I get excited about this stuff, but most people don't. So, it would be good to, if you have the business, get someone who does get excited about this sort of thing. I think that, for 7 and 8 figure businesses, that's someone to invest in, someone who really likes this, and then to figure out where all of your potential is. Look first at your fees. Do you have a lot of aged inventory fees? Are you, getting into trouble with shipping? Understanding all the fees and saying, what is the biggest impact that I could make if I only have so much time in the week or the month? What is the project for now? Usually it's for aged inventory. That's the thing, that the clock is ticking on that, and it's going to just get worse and worse. So going after aged inventory, really understanding what are your problems, how can you address them, and then moving on to the next thing. So maybe the next thing is looking at the impact of, what are those top 3 products that we can change the dimensions on? It's not your whole catalog. It's what we do when we audit a catalog is we'll look at what are the potential, what's the lowest hanging fruit. So the lowest amount of weight reduction, the lowest amount of size reduction, and then against the annual sales, the biggest impact. Because if I have something that is going to save me $5,000 a year versus something that's going to save me $80,000, I'm going to go after the 80. So taking those, okay, I've got my top 3. I'm not going to change everything, but focusing on those, little projects. This month we're focused on aged inventory. This month we're going to resize. We've developed a program to monitor and remeasure and do remeasure requests. Just kind of these little projects that make it easier to systemize and to confront. Because we look at all of this and I say, here's all these things you could do with your business that would fix it. And then, people just get overwhelmed and they end up doing nothing. So it's the strategy, and then it's also having the data is another big part.
I love that. Chelsea, are there any final case studies you want to share with us?
Let's see. I would say, in terms of forecasting, a story that I like to tell, the FIPS, I believe, they started using SoStock a long time ago, and this goes back to kind of the shipping, being able to get a handle on your shipping. They started using SoStock, and they were doing a lot of air shipping, and they weren't projecting out as far as they should. And so maybe I think that's an angle, is if you can project out far enough, you can make strategic plans. And so they ended up saving 75 cents per unit by switching from air shipping to sea shipping. And that had a huge impact. They ended up exiting, so whatever multiple, if you save 75 cents per unit on shipping, or if you save 75 cents per unit anywhere, that can gain you tens of thousands of dollars. But at the same point, if you're going to exit that business like they did, they ended up exiting, and that tens of thousands turned into, exponentially. I think, I don't know what their multiple was, but that was during the time when multiples were very high.
Yeah.
So I think that's a perspective of, based on savings, not what is it gaining you today, but you're saving this amount, so you're also gaining that money back to be able to scale, and you're gaining additional savings to improve your EBITDA for exit. So it really is the sooner you do it, the faster you scale and the larger your exit.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, if you're about to exit, like everything that we just talked about, like removing that aged inventory, if that's costing you 10 grand a month, right? That can add up drastically, right? Put a 3x on top of losing $100,000 a year in just aged inventory fees, right? Imagine, you sell 10,000 units a year and you can reduce that by, 75 cents by doing a lower FBA fee, right? You start to stack these wins, and that could be another $500,000, $1 million when it comes time to exit. So I think that's the power of everything that you talked about today. Chelsea, is there anything that we haven't touched on that you think Amazon sellers need to know?
I would say, I mean, we talked a little bit about cash flow. I think that understanding cash flow, it's important to draw the parallel between, I kind of like to say, sales is the equivalent of your your traffic and your conversion. Scaling is the combination of profit and cash flow. So understanding those pieces, we talked a lot about getting a handle and improving your profit, but not understanding your cash flow, or not understanding, like, one of the big questions I get when I started talking about cash flow was, I want to know how many products I can launch. So there is a lost opportunity cost in not having an answer to that question. And then if the answer is none, or the answer is 1 and you want the answer to be 2, well, maybe there's money hiding in your catalog that's draining that cash. So understanding what the true profit margins are, you can identify some of those that are bleeding your profits, and that are also just, eating up your cash flow, tying right into, moving that inventory out, regaining, because there's cash just basically sitting there. So if you start selling through that inventory, you don't restock, all of a sudden your cash flow dynamics can change, and you can then launch the products that you want to launch for a much larger gain to scaling your business.
Yeah, I love that. Now, Chelsea, and this isn't necessarily a sponsored podcast by Carbon 6, but I do want to have you tell me, like, give me the software tools that we should be using that allow us to, like, manage all of these fees. Because you mentioned, like, Seller Investigators has a cool feature of, hey, all I need to do is key in my product dimensions and it will alert me anytime Amazon changes the FBA fee. Like, that's super helpful and very scalable. What other tools have you seen or been built out to help manage everything that you talked about today?
Sure. Yeah. So for Seller Investigators, on the topic of the resizing, one of the things that they will also do is, if you've got a product that has been resized, I mean, this is beyond, the other fees that are acquired. If there's a product that has been in the wrong size tier and you get them to reduce it, you can go back and get 90 days worth of those fees. It's not as high of a success rate as the other ones. Amazon likes to, kind of hold on to their money, but there is success in being able to do that. So they'll file those cases for you to, get that money back. So that's with the resizing. And then we've got tools now in SoStocked to help to forecast your aged inventory, forecast overstock, and to be able to figure out what to do with that. So things like, if you remove it, what is the impact of removal? What is the impact of, using liquidation? Amazon has a liquidation program. What do I have to do to sell through that inventory to make those right decisions? And then I would say the last piece in terms of, improving your profit would be that PPC Entourage has an audit where they'll do an ad spend audit to see what products are, or what keywords are possibly, damaging your ad spend, not performing to where they should be.
I love that. All of these 1% like efficiencies can truly add up in a business. On the topic of liquidations, do you have any recommendations? Let's say I've got way too much inventory. I've got 5 years worth of inventory at this point. I just want to liquidate stuff, or I want to exit it because, I see it tying up my cash flow. What do you have any recommendations there?
So I mean, if it is an FBA, Amazon has the FBA program. They have FBA liquidations. They also have a donations program, which can sometimes benefit, let's say in the US, I think that there are specific tax codes that you can talk to your tax accountant about. So those are a couple of programs. It wouldn't necessarily make sense to remove that inventory from FBA, paying those high removal fees, and then try to sell it to a liquidator. The math probably doesn't make sense. Maybe there are instances where it would, but that would be one approach. If you've got inventory sitting at a 3PL, there are companies that will do the liquidation for you. So Hanu Worldwide is one of the companies that we work with. Norm Farrar is one of the co-founders of that, and they'll do liquidations. So really just, asking your warehouses. A lot of warehouses do it now, and then you don't have to do anything. They won't take the money. They won't take any payment until they receive payment. So it's really just a percentage of what they make.
Okay. Love it. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
All right, Chelsea, this has been an awesome episode. I appreciate the insights that you shared. Here's my final question for you. Okay. Where do you see the puck going with Amazon, and what's your prediction of what selling on Amazon looks like 5 years from now?
Yeah. So Amazon, they have been doing everything that they can to get you into more and more of their programs. I think that is the big push from everything that we've seen coming out. Amazon taking FBA. FBA used to be a loss to them. They would make up their money in ads and in referral fees. Now FBA, for the first time ever, has broken even. They're not going to be satisfied with that. They are going to make it a revenue source. And I think that they're going to we've already seen they're doing it aggressively. So continuing on that, they're going to continue to grow the supply chain by Amazon portion of their business. They took lemons and they made lemonade. In that 2020, 2021, they just overbought. They overinvested in logistics, and now they're working on making that a huge revenue source for them. So I think that in 5 years, we're paying I think someone said 40% of our money is going to Amazon. At that point, I would imagine that, we'd be looking more at 70%. Like the majority of our costs will probably be going to Amazon. It'll be harder for you to make it make sense to go anywhere else. Unfortunately, they're going to make it financially incentivized in many, many ways.
So true or false, as Amazon continues to mature, do you see in the grocery category, right, and in big box retail, typically you're going to be looking at like single digit profit margins? Do you see that that's where Amazon heads for Amazon sellers? Like, long gone are the days of 20%, 25% profit margins, and you're into the single digit profit margins 5 to 10 years from now? I
don't think so, because Amazon wants diversity, right? It's all about, inventory in terms of listings and catalog. They need small businesses. They've been pushing out some of the small businesses, but they need small businesses that are the lifeblood of Amazon. The majority of their money comes from small businesses. And with the low amounts of volume, the only way you can have the single digits is if you have high amounts of volume. And the volume that's being done by the sellers who are who are really the lifeblood, they can't survive on single digit. So I don't think that there's got to be a balance. Amazon's going to have to, find that balance between, their profitability and them losing catalog items.
Yeah, makes sense. I love it. Chelsea, as we wrap up this episode, I love to leave the audience with 3 actionable takeaways from every episode. So here are the 3 actionable takeaways that I noted. Let me know if you feel like I'm missing something.
Okay.
Number 1, I feel like the biggest action item that you can take that's probably going to make the biggest difference is going to be negotiating supplier terms, right? As shipping becomes more expensive, as shipping lead times get longer, The people that are going to win are going to be the people that are more nimble and have cash reserves. And so not locking up all of your inventory, having a 70% upfront payment on your inventory, or even 50%. But like Chelsea talked about, is there an opportunity for you to get net 90-day terms? Is there an opportunity for you to get 30-day terms, or 30% upfront, but then have them store the actual inventory for maybe a year, but you're continually dripping stuff into Amazon, and you're only having to pay that remaining 70% when stuff actually gets shipped out, right? There's a lot of creative strategies there, but that I think is going to make the biggest difference, and also allow you to grow your business faster because you'll have more cash on hand. Action item number 2 is focusing on your aged inventory and having a plan of action for it. So making sure that you have somebody in your business that is actively focused on, hey, what is my action plan as soon as something crosses 180 days, before we get close to that 270-day, really high fee that Amazon's going to charge you. How are you going to get rid of this product? Okay. So having that in place, and also I think that just leads further into forecasting, inventory management, and projections, knowing that Amazon FBA needs to be seen as like, can I sell out of this product in the next 60 to 90 days? That's probably like the healthy amount you want to continue to send into Amazon. And then last but not least is getting really efficient with the product packaging that you're putting your products into, remeasuring your products and having Amazon remeasure to make sure it's actually in the correct weight, correct dimensions, correct FBA tier, because there's a lot of opportunity to save money there. And maybe there's a way that you could become more efficient. If everything's polybagged and it's a loose polybag right now, what does it look like to go into like a box? Because if it's in a box, you might need to pay an extra 5 cents. But what if that now drops you down into a lower FBA fee tier and you're saving 70 cents, right? So a lot of give and take. But you can see that the people that, in my opinion, are going to win over the next 5 to 10 years, I think it's going to be very challenging for a small business owner on Amazon. I think the single guy that just hit 7 figures, it's going to be really challenging to maintain profitability. Whereas the people that got started early, if you build a team now that can oversee these little like nuances, the remeasurements, the aged inventory, building out a team like that is going to allow you to maintain profitability while Amazon continues the margin squeeze on sellers. Because like you said in your projection, over the next 5 years, I think Amazon's going to want more of the piece of the pie, and they're going to continue to squeeze to make sure that they show Wall Street. Andy Jassy, that's what he's focused on, right? Yeah. He wants profitability. He's speaking to Wall Street, and he's not speaking to Amazon sellers. So he's going to be 100% focused on like, how do we show great profitability and on the FBA side of the business that's going to increase shareholder value, et cetera. And so if you're not watching those things, Amazon's going to eat you up and eat all your margin if you're not paying attention. So Chelsea, anything else that you would add?
No, I think that's great. I think that, just the final piece is, strategically planning your business. There's a quote that I love by Peter Drucker, who is, business. I think they call him the father of modern business management. And he had said, strategic planning does not deal in future projections. What does it say? Strategic planning does not deal in future. It deals in the future of present actions.
I love that.
Which is
really well summed up.
Very much. I think that's the one of the biggest takeaways for any Amazon seller nowadays, is that it's not as easy as it used to be. And so being able to plan out, what does your business look like in 6 months? What does it look like in a year? Because you should never be surprised when Amazon takes, like in November last year, people were surprised when Amazon took, $25,000 out of their account from storage fees. And that shouldn't be happening. So I think that's projections is the key.
Agreed. I love it. All right, Chelsea, final questions I love to ask each guest. So number one, what's been the most influential book that you've read and why?
So the best book that I've read is The One Thing. It's the idea that multitasking is a myth and that there's always one thing that is the most important thing, and to be able to figure out what that one thing is and then focus on it, get it done. Otherwise, you're building half bridges to nowhere.
I love that. That is one of my favorite all-time books.
Yeah.
One of those books that you need to read every 1 to 2 years to reset your mindset and be like, yeah, that's right. That's right. I need to cut this out. I need to focus on this. So I can't recommend that enough as well. Question number 2, what's your favorite AI tool that you're using that other people should be?
Sure. I would say it's not necessarily, that fancy in terms of an AI tool, but I use ChatGPT I do a lot of work in spreadsheets, when I do product development, and I use a lot of, spreadsheets, create formulas, create scenarios, and I'm proficient in Excel, but I'm not an expert. So I like to use it to help me to build formulas. It's very, very good at that. And it's one of those things that you can directly validate whether it's right or not. Because you may know how to, you may know what the answer should be in the spreadsheet, but you may not be able to get there formula-wise. So I like to use ChatGPT, or basically take a formula that I think is right, and then I throw it up there and I say fix, or I say make it do this, and it will just build the whole formula. And then you can just plug it in, and generally works.
I love it. So allowing ChatGPT to be your Excel wizard for you.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. All right. Final question here for you. Who is somebody that you admire or respect the most in the e-commerce space that other people should be following, and why?
Sure. I would say Tomer Rabinovich. He thinks differently. He sees those things that other people are not seeing. Like, he finds those missing pieces. When everyone's looking over here, he's saying, well, what about this? Whenever anyone says, here's the rules that we were all taught in selling, you find something that's, less expensive. It doesn't need a lot of, changes. Don't go into electronic products, all of those things. He goes, well, this is why you should do those. So this is why you should do the hard things. And then he just has this view on understanding the profit and the cash flow and being able to think with the end in mind, in terms of, if you're exiting a business, this is how you should build it, and build it from day one like that. So he gives very good perspective on that side of things. And I think that, he's probably one of the smartest people that I've talked to, where I was like, I felt like having to keep up with him because his mind works so quickly. And so I think he's great. I think that people should follow him for those reasons.
Yes, that is a great person to be following, and I agree with that. Chelsea, this has been so much fun. If people want to follow you, they want to learn more, where can people learn more and follow you at?
Sure. So if you go to sostock.com/connect, those are all my social media. You can find the tools that we talked about. And then I believe my email's there as well.
Okay. Awesome. Chelsea, this has been such a good podcast episode. I know I've got some notes and takeaways. So thanks again for your time today.
Of course. Thanks.
Thank you for listening. Visit ecommbreakthrough.com for more information. If you've enjoyed today's episode, the best way you can show your appreciation is by clicking the subscribe button and quickly leaving a review. See you again next time.